Hey, hi, howdy. The camera's moved. I got a little bit more creative with my limited space at the moment. Mostly, I was trying to make it so I won't get too comfy and start falling asleep while I'm reading. Not that I do that. No one's caught me doing that. But yeah, so again, my camera sucks. I suck at using it, and I'm lazy, and I'm not trying. So that's all of the reasons why this looks the way it does. Thank you, Brian, for showing up. I swear I remember that. I think that is your name, but if not, Alex Rogan's Ghost is a fine name too. And Dee Dee, thank you for stopping by. It is super awesome that you keep doing that. And trying to fix this so I don't stare off into space too much, anyways. All right. Oh, good. I'm glad I got that right. Thank you. But I can call you Alex Rogan's Ghost if you prefer. I don't want to, misname you. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, so tonight I'm excited that it's a Friday, so I don't have to worry about work. I swear, work just eats you up sometimes. All right, so again, we're kind of in the middle of a chapter because I have been failing horribly at staying awake to my own voice. Oh, that's very sweet. I'll go with Brian, and I'll say it more confidently now that I know that's actually your name. Because then I was thinking, well, maybe it's Ryan. And then I'm like, oh, I don't know. If I say it and I'm completely wrong, then I'll just sound like a douche. So, cool. Good to know I'm working on it. All right, so let's figure out what chapter we're on here. I'm on page 193. Can you imagine that? But it's a really long chapter. Okay, chapter 21. Let's see. All right. Okay. Sorry, I was not prepared for this. Imagine that. All right. Christine was cruising through the parking lot now, looking for him. While he'd been thinking, Lemuel had managed to keep out of Christine's sight by adroit ducks and dodges. He had to stop her from leaving, and quickly. He was surprised that the collision hadn't already alarmed the patrons of the bar. The noise level inside the cartoon saloon must be incredible. Lemuel flitted from one row of cars to the next, trying to be seen. Christine spotted him and roared around the end, accelerating with every foot. Another leap put Lemuel on top of a Mustang, and then a Dodge Ram. He and Christine played tag for a few more seconds. Even with his great strength, Lemuel was beginning to tire. Christine had gotten used to his leaping by now and was trying to time lunging the car at him to hit him where he would be. Sorry. Time to shake things up and end this. Lemuel waited, and then instead of jumping to the car of one of the next row of cars, he jumped on the hood of Olivia's car, plunging his hand through the windshield and grabbing Christine by the throat while she was still gaping out at him through the glass. In her struggle, her foot left the accelerator. She thrashed and fought and scratched wildly. Lemuel was not unscathed in the fracas, but he managed to gouge out a handful of her throat, so she could not speak if she wanted to. He had to make sure she died before she could heal. He had to hurry. She was freshly fed while he was getting weaker. At least the car was no longer moving, but was lodged again against the still running truck with its two silent passengers. Lemuel, both arms through the windshield now that he didn't have to hold on to the car, was tearing at Christine with his fingers hooked. His head, mashed against the edge of the windshield, forced his eyes to turn to the huge cutout of Yosemite Sam with lettering in his talk bubble that read, "Park here, Podda." Lemuel made an X through the broken glass, even deeper. He snapped Christine's spine. Even a vampire had to stop fighting with a broken spine. She went limp, but he didn't trust her and drove a finger through her eye to her brain. "Lights out," he whispered, and came very close to losing consciousness. He thought he was dreaming when he saw Olivia appear beside the car with a stake in one hand, a gun in the other. He was so weak and addled that he opened his mouth to tell her he loved her, to beg her not to kill him. Instead, Olivia pulled open the car door and drove the stake into Christine's chest. "You ruined my fucking car," she snarled. She pulled the stake out and sank it in again. "Asshole." "She is very dead," Lemuel said, feeling much more optimistic. "Olivia, can you give me a hand? And not one of Christine's, please." Olivia turned to look at him for the first time. "Oh my God," she said. "Lemuel." She eased him off the hood of the car and held him up while he wrapped his right arm around her. They staggered over to Lemuel's sports car. "Go back," he said. "Open the doors of the truck and turn it off. Cover your fingers. No prints." She ran back to the truck, which was still running, and did those things. "The woman is dead," she said. "The man is still breathing." "Time for us to skedaddle," he said, and they climbed into Lemuel's sports car and eased carefully out of the back of the Cartoon Saloon parking lot onto a side street where all businesses were closed. Let's see. You can talk. Yes, LOL. Sorry, I have two different versions of the chat open, and neither one of them are big enough for me to read without my glasses on. So, yay me. Oh, and hey, that's where my lighter went. Not that I use those for anything. Again, thanks for stopping by, you guys. I really appreciate it. Your company is always welcome. It's nice to read in company. Olivia drove like a dream, never exceeding the speed limit and braking with such gentleness that it seemed surprising when the car actually stopped. She was trying to prevent jolting Lemuel. "He followed me," he said, and closed his eyes to concentrate on his healing. "Not quickly enough, but aren't you glad I did? I was almost to Marthasville when you called." You could hear the muscles in her neck as her head turned. He had never been so attuned to someone before. "Why? Why I'd follow you? I sat behind the counter for 5 minutes, and every minute I sat, I grew more worried. I didn't trust that bitch. She looked at you with snake eyes. She was too resentful and too hungry." "You should have." But Lemuel couldn't finish that sentence. Sharp stabs of pain accompanied the healing, and his body jerked in response. He felt her worry like a cloud filling the car. "I should have what?" she said tartly. "Should have killed her earlier? Should have remarked on how hungry she was? I figured you, a vampire, should already know. Should have told you what a treacherous bitch she was?" Lemuel managed to nod. "Like he would have listened," Olivia said. "Nothing." You left the shop closed," Lemuel scolded weakly when she parked the car behind the store. "Sue me." She ran around to his side of the car to help him out. "I can walk," he said, and began moving carefully in a straight course for the side door. He walked slowly but steadily. Olivia ran ahead of him to unlock the door, and they paused for a moment on the landing while she relocked it. Then they went down the steps as quietly as they could, hoping they wouldn't wake Bobo on the top floor. Lemuel's apartment was open as he left it, and he felt his way inside without turning on a light. He knew Olivia was hovering in the doorway of the bedroom. "Come in here, if you please," Lemuel said. He'd taken off his clothes, which were probably ruined, and now he lay down on his bed. The worst of his wounds were healed, but he was exhausted. He wanted her closeness. "Let me feed you," Olivia whispered. Lemuel felt her hand patting to determine where he was. Then she was on the bed beside him, her warm neck pressed to his cold mouth. Lemuel bit and felt her shiver, and then his mouth was filled with the most divine taste. Her flavor was bold and brave and bright, like Olivia. He was always mindful of the need of self-control with her, and he stopped just before he would have had to chide himself. He healed the ragged marks in her neck, and she shuddered again. "Olivia," he whispered. Everywhere his body touched hers, you could feel the heat of her. "I admire you just as you are, but if you are ever weary of this life, I would gladly make you like me." "I thought you'd never ask," she whispered back. "Let me think on it, Lemuel. Would we be able to stay together?" "I am not like most vampires, as you know. We would be able to, as long as it suited us. I know there are disadvantages to being both energy and blood-fueled, but there are some good things about it too. Disadvantages? Olivia already sounded sleepy. He put his arm around her. Possibly he could get her closer. I could hide what I am, he said. Everyone who looks at me knows I am not human, and I am not beautiful like so many of the blood vampires. You were changed by someone who loved you, she murmured. That has to make a difference. Lemuel had never thought of that. He did now, lying with Olivia in his arms, both of them on the verge of sleep. What happened to your wife? Olivia said, suddenly sounding a bit more alert. It was not only Lemuel who was thinking of something for the first time. The man who changed her. He came to woo her a few years later. By that time we were strapped. 2 energy suckers in an area within a thin population and very little transient traffic. It just wouldn't work in those days. I was trying to live as I had when I was alive, plowing the fields at night, moving the cattle around then too. That wasn't working either. I had never been anything but poor and a cowboy. I had always planted just enough for my wife and me. We never had any but stillborn children, thank God. Because after our days and nights reversed, that would have happened to them. What would have happened to them? So this man came back and he took your wife away with him? He did. At that time we were broke with each other. He changed me to save my life, but the life we had together wasn't worth it. Yet we didn't have much of any idea of how to change it. Tell me the rest later? Surely. Night-night. He smiled over her head in the darkness, and then they were both asleep. No customers came to Midnight Pond in the hours before the sun was up, but 3 skunks, a fox, and 7 opossums died under the traffic light that night. The creature underneath raised a finger. It had not moved in almost 250 years. Oh boy. Hey, Jeremy. Thanks for stopping by. Apologies for the super awkward camera angle. You can see me in the corner and then junk over to the side. And also my hat from my logo. And yeah. This is going to be kind of awkward because I forgot to load up on water. But my dog fell asleep and he's nice and calm. So we're going to try to work with what we've got. Yeah. Chapter 22. Bobo rose early in the morning and went to the front window to check for dead people. The Rev was heading away for the intersection with a wheelbarrow full of limp animals. Daedric was trailing after the old minister, so Bobo didn't run down to offer his own help. He turned away, shaking his head. It was obvious this wasn't going to be any ordinary day, and Bobo wondered if there would ever be an ordinary day again. Bobo dressed with some haste, and he took his bowl of oatmeal down to the shop with him. There was a new note beside the cash register, which he read with some bewilderment. Arthur Smith walked through the door within the hour. Since he was the sheriff, he didn't have to wear a uniform, though he usually preferred to. Today, Smith was very well turned out in a navy blazer, sharply pressed khakis, and a starched white shirt. His tie was a cheerfully subdued plaid of blue and green and a hint of red. Looking good, Bobo said by way of greeting. Thanks, Arthur said uncomfortably. I have a thing later. Okay, what can I do for you before you have your thing? Bobo added together Arthur's discomfort, the fact that he'd been seeing Magdalena Orta Powell very steadily, and Arthur's romantic history. Bobo suspected that Arthur was about to get married again. I can't rouse your tenants. Of course, Bobo had heard Arthur try the side door, so this was no news to him. He had wondered if he should intervene, but he'd correctly figured Arthur would come into the shop through the front door. The side door always stays locked until one of us goes out that way, Arthur. Of course, you can't see Lemuel. It's daytime. I can't believe you tried. Olivia worked the counter in here last night, too. Is this about her car? The note had said, Bobo, my car was stolen last night, so people may show up asking for me. Olivia. Yes, mostly, Arthur said. He still looked grim. Lemuel is all right? As far as I know, I can go check if you want. That would be a relief to me. Bobo went out the side door to the landing and downstairs. He heard a little stirring in Olivia's apartment, so he knocked softly. She opened the door so swiftly he was startled and stepped back. "What's up?" she said. She had just showered and was wrapped in a towel. Her auburn hair trickled drops of water on her shoulders. "Is Lem okay? The sheriff is upstairs asking." "What happened?" Bobo whispered. "Lemuel's fine. Tell Arthur I'll be up in just a minute," she said. "I can explain then." Her voice was at a normal level. "You could shout at Lem and wouldn't wake up, you know." "Right," Bobo said, a little embarrassed. Up the stairs he went to relay Olivia's message. He and Arthur had a calm exchange of pleasantries until she came in. She looked pale to Bobo, but he noticed she had put on makeup and an outfit that was nicer than her usual midnight wear. "Arthur, thanks for coming in person about my car. Did you find it?" Olivia was all helpfulness. Sorry. "We did find your car, but I'm afraid I have bad news," Arthur said. "There was a small amount of ash that was a different color in the front seat. We think it was a dead vampire, and the car was wrecked. It had evidently bounced around like a pinball between the cars in the parking lot at the Cartoon Saloon in Marthasville." "A dead vampire?" Olivia seemed genuinely startled. "I didn't think there was enough left of them after they died. I mean, to tell a vampire was there." There was a pile of flaky stuff left," Arthur said. "I had never seen anything like it, but I've read about it in law enforcement journals. I've matched the pictures I've seen of vampire remains." He paused. Were you out last night?" "Briefly," she said, "but most of the night I was helping Lemuel. He had the night shift here in the pawn shop, as usual." "And by helping, you mean?" "Keeping him company," she said promptly. "He's my sweetie." The idea of Lemuel as a sweetie made Bobo turn away with a grin. "And when you say you were out," Arthur was persistent, "it was his job." Olivia turned to Bobo. "Don't get mad, but Lem and I took a walk. It was such a pretty night we couldn't resist, and we were only gone 30 minutes, but during that time my car went missing. Or at least that's what when I noticed it was gone." "I don't suppose you left your key fob in it." "No," she said. It had actually been in Lemuel's pocket. "Can you narrow down how long it might have been missing?" "I used the Civic yesterday afternoon," she said, looking thoughtful. "I drove to Davie and back. After that, I didn't take it out. I can't remember looking behind the store for any reason, so I guess it was stolen between 5 p.m. and 1 a.m. I hardly see how it could have been taken in the daytime, so I'd imagine it was taken after dark." Arthur didn't respond to that. "Could I see your key fob?" She pulled a key ring out of her pocket and showed it to him. "Here it is," she said, "plus side door key and apartment key." "These haven't left your possession?" "No," she said. "What about your extra key fob?" "I checked last night, and it's in the drawer in my apartment." "That was some talented vampire," Bobo said. "Knew how to boost a car without keys." "Hey, how is that possible?" "Usually your fob has to be within a couple of feet to open your car," Arthur said. "But there's a device called a power amplifier. If the fob is within a certain radius, it can open the car, and the thief can't start it." "Damn," Bobo said, truly amazed. "I had no idea. Can you say Olivia's car is totaled?" "It looks totaled to me," Arthur said. "And not only did a vampire die and the car get totaled, along with a lot of damage to others, but the Civic hit a pickup truck so hard that the woman inside snapped her neck, and the man who was with her is in intensive care. At least that is what we're assuming happened to them." "That's awful," Bobo said. "Do you think he'll make it?" "Maybe," Arthur said. "But surely Olivia can't be held liable for the woman's death and the man's injuries." Bobo was indignant. "I mean, after all, her car got stolen." "I'm really sorry for all of this," Olivia said, "but at least the dead vampire isn't Lemuel, and the man in the hospital may recover. I'll try to focus on that." She looked determined and brave. "Oh, by the way, and far down on the list, I called my insurance agent the first thing this morning, Matt Wrigley, to alert him about the theft. Did he contact you?" Arthur nodded. "One of my deputies talked to him when he described the situation. Matt said he'll call you later today after he's seen your car." "I've only had the Civic for 3 years, and I got a great deal on it secondhand. Now I'll have to go through the process again." Olivia's expression was sour. She genuinely chagrined about that, at least, Bobo thought. Abruptly, he longed to simply walk out of the pawn shop and across the road to Fiji's place. He wanted to sit down on her back porch and drink any beverage she cared to offer him. He wanted to have an ordinary conversation with her. Maybe he could hold her hand while they talked. That would be so nice. He missed her so much. She had called him when teacher had searched her house, but since then she'd reverted to keeping her distance. Bobo! From her tone, Bobo understood Olivia had said its name several times. Sorry, I was daydreaming, he said. If the insurance guy comes in here, can you tell him to come up? I'm going to be doing some research on another vehicle on my laptop. Sure. That unnecessary instruction had been worth interrupting his thoughts. Olivia, at least you know what happened to your car, Arthur said. He, too, did not sound pleased. I guess it's just an amazing coincidence that you happened to date the only vampire in a large radius, and then a vampire stole your car out of all the cars within that radius. Then that vampire died in that car after wrecking it for no reason. An amazing coincidence, Olivia agreed seriously. And with that, Arthur left. Olivia said, he was looking good. She sounded very calm and innocent. My guess is that he's getting married again. He was sure dressed up. Bobo walked to the front window and looked across the road to Fiji's cottage. Sylvester Ravenwing walked by. That's the new guy at the gas station, Bobo said. What's he doing out at the store? Speaking of looking good, Olivia said, that guy is completely hot. And my second question would be, why is he going to Manfred's? They moved in unison to watch the new guy cross the lawn to the house next door. Huh, said Bobo. He was curious, too. Interesting, said Olivia. And then an ancient pickup pulled up out front of Midnight Pond, and an equally ancient man unloaded a large tin statue of a horse from the back. I'll leave you to all the excitement, Olivia said. You better get the door for him. Thanks, muttered Bobo when she'd gone. After one more longing look across the street at Fiji's place, he hurried to open the door. As the old man struggled into Midnight Pond, Bobo noticed that Ravenwing was knocking at Manfred's door. Oh, hey, Thomas. I'm sorry I didn't see you pop up there. It's been a while, too. I'm so sorry. I don't know if you're still there. I don't have to worry about ignoring Jeremy. He knows that I ignore him. Also, again, sorry for staring off everywhere. My chat's in a really weird spot. So, hello, Thomas. Thank you for stopping by. It's very sweet. And I guess hello, Jeremy, too. Thank you for stopping by. Oh, no, and Jeremy 5, technically. Jeremy 5, comma as well. Wow. Thank you, Dee Dee. That's very sweet. I have a lot of stuff hanging around, and that guy covering stuff up. Aw, thanks for stopping in, Thomas. Don't stay up too late. You have a lot of work in the morning. Yeah, there you go. Good. I'll have a good night. Yeah, dream sweet and all that jazz. Thanks for being so awesome today, Thomas. All right, where were we? Chapter 23. Hello, Manfred said. His brows drew together at seeing the stranger, which did odd things to Manfred's piercings. You haven't been in the store yet to greet me, the stranger said. Sorry, who are you? Sylvester Ravenwing. Okay, pleased to meet you. I'm Manfred Bernardo. He shook Ravenwing's hand and turned away to return to his desk, but Ravenwing didn't budge. Did you want to come in? I do. We need to talk. Mystified, Manfred took a step back. Come to the kitchen, he said. I have some Coca-Cola or tea, or I can make coffee. Tea is fine. Manfred led the way back, and he just knew Sylvester's eyes were taking in the shabby, comfortable house. Soon Manfred and his unexpected and unwanted guest were ensconced at the kitchen table. Manfred was vaguely aware that if he had been Fiji, he would have offered cookies or something, But that was very much not the case. His unexpected visitor did not say a word. "We were brought up by your grandmother," Sylvester said, as soon as Manfred had put the tea on the table and pulled out a chair. No other conversational opener could have startled Manfred more. "Why do you want to know?" he asked, then slapped himself mentally. By the sound of it, Sylvester wasn't asking a question, but stating a familiar fact. "I knew her," Sylvester said, and that was another earth-shaker. "Then you probably know that after a certain point, my mom couldn't put up with me, so she handed me over to my grandmother. And Zilda and I got along like a house of fire, while my mother lived with the regret she had about that, and still does, though she's happier now that she's married." His eyes narrowed. He waited for Sylvester's next move. "I knew Zelda when she was very young," Sylvester said. "How?" Manfred was tired of all this pussyfooting. "We were together for a while." Manfred had 3 instant and equally violent reactions. He was struck dumb. He also had 100 things to say, and he wanted to punch Sylvester. These did not blend well, and he began coughing. He inhaled sharply, held his breath, then he slowly exhaled. The biggest secrets in his family had been the identity of his mother's father and the identity of his own. Sometimes Zilda had claimed the man she married had been Rain's father. Sometimes she had just smiled when he asked her. "You don't look old enough," Manfred said, and congratulated himself on his even voice. Sylvester said, "She aged, but I stayed this way." "Are you human?" Manfred asked. "Not completely." Sylvester's face was impassive, which Manfred simply could not understand. He had to be having an emotion about this. Regret or something? Anything? "Are you my grandfather?" Manfred said, almost holding his breath at the enormity of this question. He wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "I am," Sylvester said. Manfred's breath whooshed out. He didn't know if he was relieved or disappointed. Mostly he was terrified. After all these years, an answer. At least one. "Okay, a few questions," he began cautiously. "How come we don't look anything alike? I mean, at all?" "I don't always look like this," Sylvester said. Again, not what Manfred had expected. "Arg," he said. "I'll come back to that later. Did you ever see my grandmother after your fling?" "I think 2 years is more than a fling. Yes, I saw Zilda from time to time, but not in her last 10 years. "So, you know she died?" Manfred said slowly. "Yes, her light blinked out in my heart." "Flowery, but you didn't come to her deathbed. You didn't attend her funeral." "I was very fond of her, nonetheless." "So, just to be absolutely clear, my mother is your daughter." "She is. But she's not anything like you, or me, and she sure as hell can't change her appearance." "No, everything skipped a generation. That happens sometimes. Zelda told me that her grandfather was the one who had had the power before her." Manfred dimly recalled Zelda telling him the same thing. "Do we have to do this question by question? Can't you just tell me the story?" Manfred forced himself to take a sip of tea. His hands were shaking. "I am not so good at telling histories, but I'll do my best. I was born to Chickasaws in the area now known as Tennessee. My mother, Squirrel's Hands, was a wise woman. Her husband had just died, and she was childless. She wanted a son more than anything. She knew she had the sickness in her belly, the same one that had killed her own mother. When she met up with a demon named Kalkanar, and she was never clear about how that happened, whether he had sought her out or she had summoned him, she struck a bargain with him. Her bargain was this, that in return for becoming free of the sickness, she would bear the child of Kalkanar. Demons rarely breed to make their own babies, which perhaps you knew." Manfred shook his head faintly. "Oh, huh?" Sylvester seemed a little disappointed. "My mother got Kalkanar to agree that she would have her child with her. She would have her child with him as long as she lived." Manfred nodded. This story is not going to end well, he thought. Sylvester nodded gravely back. He continued. "Kalkanar, my father, had said he would take the cancer away. He did, but he did not guarantee Squirrel Hands that she would be healthy. and she didn't think of asking for that. Whether Kalkanar caused it or not, my mother got an inflamed appendix, or maybe some womb infection. At least, those are my best guesses. I was about 10, maybe 12, when my mother died, after considerable suffering. The moment she was dead, Kalkanar came to get me. Manfred had heard stranger stories and believed them. There were other people there? He asked. Members of your tribe? Sylvester nodded. Did they see him? How would I know? He took me. I didn't get to do any post-abduction interviews. Sylvester looked at Manfred as though he were wondering if his grandson was deficient. Manfred reminded himself to be patient. All right, so you went with your father. Did you know who he was? Oh, he told me who he was right away. I believed him. If you had seen him, you would have believed him too. And Sylvester shivered. Just today? Oh, I always enjoyed Thomas's company. Hey, Nigel, thanks for popping in. I am doing peachy keen, and the more the merrier. And I am constantly apologizing for looking everywhere on my monitor here. So there you go. You haven't missed too much. You got a vampire fight and a car crash, and somebody finding out that their granddad is something that's not quite human. Yeah. Let's see. Manfred tried to not think about how frightening that must have been for a preteen boy. So were things a lot different with your dad? I know that's a stupid question, but I guess I want to know how you managed in Demon Land. I guess it's not actually below us. Different realm, Sylvester said. A different dimension, I think. Different creatures, different laws. All the lines of his face were drawn and grim as he told Manfred this. Why'd he want you? Good question, said Sylvester, for the first time showing some approval. He was preparing me to be useful, so he could offer me to his ruler as a servant. Kalkanar was proud of having a son. I would have been a rare gift. But that didn't happen. Kalkanar sent me out into the earth. Time had passed differently. Everything had changed. There were white people everywhere. Sylvester Ravenwing looked sad. He'd sent me here, though there was no town then, no midnight. He ordered me to verify the report that a powerful witch was living in this area. Demons enjoy having sex with witches, especially virgin witches, though the witches don't always survive it. Manfred winced. So you found the witch? I did, and I liked her. I was so impressed with her that I confessed why I had come. My father would be coming for her. She had had a forewarning, and she was gathering people to help her, other people with magical abilities. By now, Manfred could see where the story was going. She planned to trap him? Yes, grandson. She called together everyone of power she could find, because Kalkanar was strong. If he gave me to his lord, the sacrifice of his son would gain him power. If he had sex with the witch, he would gain even more power. His ambition was to establish a kingdom on earth, a place all his own. What about the rest of the demons? Why didn't they want to do the same thing? Do all humans want to conquer Russia or Australia? Manfred had no answer for that. So did the witch and her crew bind the demon? Yes, they did. How? I don't know. But you were here. No, I was not. My presence would amplify Kalkanar's power, the witch said, and she sent me away to Tennessee. So you don't know what happened. I do know that Kalkanar is still trapped. But not how. Manfred slumped his face into his hands. And there's a demon under the crossroad. Okay, how'd you meet Zelda? I traveled for years in what had become America. Sometimes I looked like my Indian self, and sometimes I looked like a white man. I kept going back to Tennessee because it was my birthplace and very beautiful. To my surprise, there came a sort of fashion for Indians, as we were called, and the remnants of my tribe held exhibitions there, tribal dances and crafts and so on. Though I was a half-demon and my Indian people knew that on some level, they still claimed me. They allowed me to use my magic nature to train as a shaman. It was very strange to be valued rather than killed off. At one of these Native American events, I met your grandmother, Zelda. She was lonely, and she was wild and beautiful, too. Sylvester smiled broadly. Her gifts had made it hard for her to have friends. She was shunned in the community. I know what that feels like, Manfred thought. She was delighted when we met. It was her birthday, and she had no one to celebrate it with. We came together by way of celebration, and we stayed together for 2 years. We were the first for each other, and I know she wore my necklace until the day she died. I could feel it. The necklace? Manfred searched his memory. The freshwater pearls? Sylvester nodded. She did wear it always, but you left. She didn't think I would make a good father for the child. When she did a reading of your mother as a baby, she married a human man to teach her mother how to be human, since I couldn't. So why are you here now? It can't be a coincidence, Manfred thought. You're not just here to do your grandparental duty by me. That's the important part. Sylvester looked even sterner than before. I will tell you. Sylvester's narrative style left a lot to be desired. Manfred was heartsick and had too much to think about to know where to begin. Get to the point, he said. However, the witch imprisoned my father. The spell has lasted 250 years, and it's about to wear out. Sylvester was pleased to have finally gotten to what he considered the main point. You're going to have to do some more talking, Manfred said. Everyone needs to hear this. Let's see. Oh, thank you, Dee Dee. Oh, man. Chapter 24. That evening at home cooking, Quinn and Daedric were eating at the big round table the locals used, while the Rev was settled at his normal table for one. Rev was not much for conversation during meals or at any time. Soon after the two were-tigers sat down, they were joined by Olivia, and then Chewie and Joe. The two men looked incomplete without Rasta. We can check on him with our phones, Joe said. We can see him in his kennel at the vet's. We miss the little fella, but until the situation here is settled, that's where he should stay. It's just too small a creature to handle this, Chewie said sadly. The suicides, the tension, and now the smell. Smell? Daedric took a long drink of chocolate milk. Hasn't the air seemed different to you? His father asked. Quinn tried to speak gently, but there was an unmistakable chiming noise and note in his words. Were-tigers should be alert to smells and sights around them. It seems a little bitter, Daedric said, like grapefruit burned. Not a bad description, Quinn said, feeling relieved. I'm wondering if you should be taken somewhere away from this. This is not a healthy place. Father, Daedric said sharply, I'm not Rasta. I'm a man now, and I have to take my place in the world. Bubba, who had just entered, paused in the act of pulling out a chair. He looked at Daedric askance. If we knew what the place was, Quinn didn't think of himself as a warrior, but this evening he was troubled. The only son he was ever likely to have was in a dangerous location, where the supernatural world and the natural world felt like they were coming closer to each other every night. My place is here with the people who raised me, his son told him, with a definitive overtone of, duh. Daedric, said a rusty voice from the table by the window, finally breaking the silence. The boy flinched, glancing over at the Rev and then back to Quinn. What he saw in Quinn's face made him feel even worse. Excuse me, Father, Daedric said, his words tumbling over each other. I know you've done your best to protect me, even if it meant your absence. I know I need to learn your business so I can carry it on, but I love it here. Then you'll be glad to know we've bought a house in Midnight, Quinn said, trying to salvage the moment he thought would be so happy. There was a moment of blank silence. Then Daedric started laughing, and Chewie and Joe smiled, and even the Rev looked a little less grim. You all are moving to town to stay? Adana had come to the table to take her orders. Welcome to the neighborhood. Everyone at the table was disconcerted, not by the purchase of a house by John Quinn, but because none of them had thought of the Reeds as permanent residents. Before Madonna could take offense at the moment of silence, Daedric picked up little Grady, who had staggered over to the table on unsteady legs, and swung him high. Grady threw up his hands and laughed, and they all laughed with him. Daedric leaned over to kiss Quinn's cheek. It was a very happy moment for Quinn. Lenore Whitefield, who managed the hotel, came in then, and though the Midnighters continued to talk, they were all surprised. Lenore and her husband, Harvey, a jerk no one liked except presumably Lenore, had kept aloof from the little midnight community. It was natural they would not interact that often. The hotel bought its groceries in Davie. It only employed a handful of people, a cook from Davie at breakfast time, another one who came in for lunch and dinner, a maid, evening clerk, Marina, and Daedric. Lenore did a large share. Okay, good. Excuse in there? Okay. Wow, this guy takes over all the seats here. Hey, Thomas Connolly. Thanks for coming in. Thanks. Yeah. Well, you're super awesome. Thank you. That's really kind. I'm just happy that, you thought you'd stop by even for a second. It's cool. I ramble like a fool, so that's why I'm reading. There we go. Where was I? There we go. Now, however, Lenore needed something. That was evident in her stance. Mrs. Reed, do you have a moment? She asked, perching on one of the seldom used stools at the counter. I will in 15 minutes, Madonna said, glancing at the clock by the door to the kitchen. If you can wait that long. I can, said Lenore. She swiveled on the stool to look at the table where the others were sitting. Hi, Daedric. Who's your buddy? This is Grady, Mrs. Whitefield, Daedric said. He waved baby Grady's hand at the woman. How are you? I'm just fine. She seemed a bit bemused at Daedric's careful manners. Hi, Mr. Quinn. I hope you're enjoying your stay at the hotel. We sure like to have repeat guests like you. Yes, it's very comfortable, Quinn said. And thanks for employing my son. Not many people want to mop and clean anymore, Lenore said, shaking her head. Her short brown hair, heavily shot with gray, was thick and wiry, giving it somewhat the appearance of a dog's coat. The accepted opinion in Midnight was that Lenore was a nice enough person, not extremely bright, clinging to her job with desperate tenacity since it had rescued her and Harvey from dire straits. She seemed to be direct and honest. It was a good food night at home cooking, but and every night was at least pretty good, ranging up to sublime. Donna Reed might not have won any personality contests, but she could, damn it, cook. Even Chewy, who was quite the chef himself, took his hat off to Madonna, at least metaphorically. What are you eating tonight, Bobo? Lenore asked. Catfish and hush puppies and slaw, Bobo said. There aren't any bad choices, though. When Madonna brought in the food, Lenore looked at their plates with keen interest. As soon as all the customers had been served, Madonna came in to lean on the counter to talk to her. What's on your mind, Lenore? Madonna had never wasted time on casual conversation. You probably know I have a cook coming from Davie to help with breakfast for everyone, and then someone else who comes to cook lunch and dinner for the residents. The non-residents have to fend for themselves. Madonna nodded, and everyone at the table scrambled to say something to each other so it didn't appear like they were listening. Well, my morning cook is still fine, but my lunch and dinner cook is about to quit. Since we only have 4 residents at the moment, I think I can do lunch, soup and sandwiches, that kind of thing. I was hoping you agreed to do the dinners. For the residents only. If that works out, maybe we could talk about supplying something for the transient guests. A few stay for weeks since they're doing contract work at the Magic Portal. Magic Portal, the large company east of Midnight that manufactured games, was a major employer in the area and also responsible for the great internet connections available in Midnight, plus most of the hotel's clientele. But I'm not just starting off with the residents. How would we convey the food? 4 extra meals won't make much difference to my workload, I figure. I have a cart that Harvey can wheel over. Do you have clay covers, cloches? I have some in the back, yes. Previous owner left them. They were very old, but usable. So I proposed that Harvey would come to get the dinners from the residents at 5:30. We would have given them their choices earlier in the day. Harvey will also return the dishes? Yes, he'll return them the next day by lunchtime. I'll give you an answer tomorrow. I'll have to figure out what to charge for this. Let me know. I'm really, really hoping you'll say yes. Madonna nodded. When Lenore had gone back to the hotel, Chewie said, You gonna do it, Madonna? Hell yeah, she said. That's gonna add up. I might have to work an hour longer, but the money should be worth it. I'll have to do some figuring. Nothing else exciting happened during the meal, though Madonna did ask all of them where Fiji was. She hasn't come in here in days, and that's not like her, Madonna said, with a smile that struck Quinn as off. He also noticed that Olivia looked down, guarding her expression. When they'd all eaten, Quinn told his son he'd see him later, and the boy left for his job, a smile on his face at the prospect of seeing Marina, Quinn figured. Quinn paid at the same time as Olivia, and when she left, he followed her to the pawn shop. As she was about to go inside, he hailed her. You following me, Tiger? She didn't seem alarmed, but mildly irritated. It's not hard to walk in the same direction as someone in midnight, Quinn said. But I have to say that I'm really curious. What is the big secret between you and Fiji? The one about Madonna? He hadn't hit the mark exactly, Quinn told himself, judging Olivia's reaction. Big secret? She smiled. I don't know any big secret. I've always been curious about the Reeds, haven't you? You mean how they managed to keep the restaurant open? Of course, but there's something else about them, something that seems significant to you. I don't know what that would be, she said. She went inside. Quinn watched her go and then spun to face the shop across the road. Before he could convince himself it was none of his business, he ran across. His feet made almost no sound when they touched the pavement. Fiji had just finished her supper and was washing up when Quinn knocked at her back door. Quinn, she said. Hi, come in. She took the chain off the door. Mr. Snuggles, who adored Quinn, appeared instantly and began basing himself against Quinn's ankles. Snug, stop it, Fiji said. I don't mind. Hi, little brother. Mr. Snuggles did not reply, but he did purr. Please have a seat. Fiji sat down in her accustomed place at the kitchen table and gestured at the chair opposite. Quinn worked himself into the small space and looked at her with frank appreciation. Looking lovely, he said, and she made a little derisive sound. He ignored it. I'm going to ask you some questions, he said, and I hope you answer them. If you don't, okay. Let's have the questions. Is there a reason you haven't been to home cooking in a few days? Yes, she said without hesitation. Is Madonna angry with you? Yes. God damn it, Fiji. This is like playing hot or cold with the kid. Yes, she said, and laughed out loud at his indignant face. Okay, I'll tell you about it. Like I told Bobo. But I'm not telling you the whole story because the whole thing is not mine to tell. Oh no, I'm going to have to go for water soon. Fair enough, Quinn said. Peachy told him about catching Teacher coming out of her house, about what Mr. Snuggles had told her, and about her subsequent reprisal. She also told him about Teacher's connection in Kaleem without going into any specifics. I get that you're leaving out parts of the story, and I feel that those parts have to do with Olivia, Quinn said. What I don't get is why Teacher would search your house if he's here to watch Olivia, and that changes my ideas about Olivia and her background, because setting up a whole business and a whole family to watch one person requires deep pockets. Yes, it does, she agreed. If you ask me, that's why the hotel got renovated. What does that have to do with anything? Because, oh shit, I'm getting into Olivia's business again. Fiji was angry with herself. I believe Teacher's been searching all our homes, all along, whenever he had a moment, just to see if the rest of us were who we said we were. What's so important about Olivia? And Fiji stared at him, her lips pressed together. Quinn felt like shaking her to knock loose the secrets. Instead, he leaned across the table and kissed her. It was a really satisfying kiss. She was warm and soft, and she smelled great, and she had the magic running internally that made every kiss zing through her blood. For the 10th time, Quinn wondered if witches were born or made. He was pretty sure that either you had magic in your blood or you didn't. PG definitely did. He was bent across the table in a strange position, so before he was really ready to stop, he had to break off. He sat back in his chair. For a minute, Fiji looked dazed. After she recovered herself, and he couldn't help but be pleased that it took a moment, she said, "Okay, that was sensational, but I'm still not going to tell you." She smiled as she said it, just a little, so Quinn would know she didn't really believe he'd been trying to bribe her to spill all with a kiss. "I like you," Quinn said directly, "and I have a suspicion that in private you work magic that we can't even imagine." Fiji smiled. "You're right, I do. No double entendre." Aw, hey CVS, thanks for popping in, man. It's good to see you. I'm just chilling and still reading Night Shift. When I finish this, boy, that'll be fun. I made the mistake of starting a second book that I was going to do on off days where, and I haven't really been doing that much, but I'm actually enjoying that one more than this one a little bit. I mean, I love this one. I'm not going to lie. But I have a big crush on Jurassic Park, and I love the book. So when I started reading that in between these readings, it was like, oh man, there's a vast difference between the styles and the action and things that like really hook you, How are you doing, CVS? I see it now and then. I'm sorry. I haven't even been on Twitter that much lately. I live in a bubble, but at least I'm reading. So I hope you're okay. I hope y'all are doing okay. Oops, phone locked itself. You're not going to give me a hint about Olivia, about your problems? Nope, not mine to tell. So I'll have to approach Olivia herself. He shook his head. Yeah, good luck with that, she said. She stood, which was a pretty clear signal for him to leave. He loafed back to the hotel, not quite suppressing a smile. The kiss had been rewarding. It had been too long since I had a good companion, Quinn thought. Daedric was on the brink of going out on his own. In view of that realization, his kiss with Fiji took on a much more interesting cast. Chapter 25. I think this will be the last one tonight because I don't want to push myself. My goal is to read my whole little book tomorrow for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie, the book. There's a mouthful for you. I don't know what you would really call it because it's a book based off the script of the movie. And honestly, that's like one of the best things ever. So yeah, I'm going to try to read all of that tomorrow night. I'm starting an hour earlier. But yeah, so got to save the voice. Chapter 25. Olivia said, telling him I'm married is sure to flesh them out. And that's what you want? Lemuel was reading the translation Christine had worked so hard on. He knew what Olivia was telling him was important to her, and therefore to him personally. But he was pretty sure the text was even more important, at least in the Midnight Universe, and just at this moment. I'm tired of this underhanded game. I want to know who the players are and who's backing them. Olivia was exercising as she talked, and the flexing of her limber body was doing nothing to aid Lemuel's concentration. Since she'd slept extra during the day, she had cleared a space for stretching in the herd of chairs occupying the pawn shop center. Lemuel watched from the high stool behind the counter, the handwritten translation before him. He tore his gaze from the papers to look at Olivia. If your father has tracked you down to watch you, he's done nothing to make you think he will harm you. The Reeds are acting on his behalf. They haven't raised a finger against you. In the past 3 years, there's been many a time they could have acted against you. Olivia paused in her swats. Okay, I concede that. The more serious threat, if I'm understanding you correctly, is that your father's right-hand man is watching you separately and unknown to your father. She nodded vigorously as she began doing lunges. He was responsible for the man who tried to grab me when I was breaking into the Goldthorpe house. Yes, you heard him say the name over his walkie-talkie? Cell phone, yes I did. So he seems bent on capturing you. However, we haven't been his agents here. One of them is responsible for the hotel. But which one? My dad owns the company that renovated the hotel. Manfred traced it back and back until he got to the source. Of course, he didn't know that the president of the company was my dad, whose name is Nicholas Wicklow. This was the first time that Lemuel had heard her father's name. Thanks for trusting me with that, he said. I wondered if you would. My real name, she said, with an air of someone doing a very necessary but distasteful task, is Melanie Horton Wicklow. No, that's your birth name, Lemuel said. Your real name is Olivia Charity. She smiled at him, and his heart felt at ease. Though she always made me call her mother, my stepmother's name was Tiffany, and I hope she never rests in peace. What about your real mother, your biological mother, as they say now? I didn't know her very well. Her name was Cara, Olivia said. From the pictures, I look like her, maybe another reason for Tiffany to do what she did. But you're uncertain about your father's knowledge of her abuse. I wavered back and forth, Olivia said, almost reluctantly. Now I feel he didn't know, but I also think you don't know something like that if you aren't paying attention. Yes, Lemuel agreed. Olivia sat on the floor cross-legged, bent forward, and stood on her hands, her legs still crossed. Lemuel eyed her with admiration and a touch of exasperation. Woman, he said, we have to talk. I thought we were. We have to talk about another topic, as interesting as I find this rare conversation about your family. Olivia rolled back into a sitting stance and looked up at him, her eyebrows raised in inquiry. What is it, Lemuel? We must call the town together, he said. I think we are about to be killed. Her phone rang. Olivia, said Manfred, we have to have a town meeting. Sylvester's 48 hours are up. Okay, I have to go one more chapter, and then it'll be even more of a tease, because, yay, it's getting somewhere. Chapter 26. The ground floor of Midnight Pond was far larger than it appeared from the outside. The bare boards of the old floor creaked as the people of midnight assembled and chose seats. Part of the fun of gathering in the pawn shop was trying out the eccentric assembly of chairs that accumulated over the years. But those coming into the pawn shop were somber, in no mood for fun. Bobo descended from his apartment as rumpled as if he had already gone to bed, though it was only 9 o'clock. When Fiji arrived, she looked exasperated. She'd been in the middle of practicing something, Lemuel deduced, from the stained bib apron still covering her t-shirt and jeans. Also, she smelled like sage. Manfred entered and took a seat, but he didn't greet anyone. He sat staring down at his hands, as if he had something very much on his mind. Daedric left work to run over to the meeting. He smelled of Marina Desato. Quinn came with him. No one objected to his presence. It seemed right. Chewie and Joe sat side by side, holding hands. Lemuel noticed it was unusual for them to display affection in public. Olivia had told Lemuel more than once that she didn't understand how he could be so tolerant of other people's sex lives and reticent about his own with her. Lemuel thought, I have always liked privacy for myself, and his strongest emotions were personal emotions, safe to be savored between himself and one other person. With no fanfares or tentativeness, Sylvester Ravenwing slid silently through the door and took his seat among them. He sat by Manfred. Ravenwing nodded to Lemuel. They had met once, both out on a stormy night. Lemuel didn't challenge the newcomer's right to be at the meeting. It was definitely a midnighter. Chewie and Joe, however, stared at Sylvester Ravenwing with some suspicion. "What's up?" Bobo said, once they were all assembled. He was doing his best not to stare at Fiji, Lemuel noticed, and Fiji reluctantly kept her face turned away from him. It was sad to see trouble between them. Here we go. I was kind of in the middle of something," Fiji said. A couple of faces turned to her. Fiji had never sounded this snappish before. Lemuel waited until they all were paying attention. It didn't take long. "I just finished reading the translation in the text. I hope would explain what has happened here," Lemuel said, "and I will tell you. Manfred has told me that Sylvester Bravenwing also has things to tell us." "What did you find, Lemuel?" Olivia asked. She was sitting on the edge of a wooden chair, at least 50 years old. "The creature buried under the crossroad is a demon, and he's about to rise," Lemuel said. There was a long moment of silence. "The demon's been talking to me," Fiji said. Everyone else was frozen in place by this revelation. Finally, Quinn said, "Okay, let's hear about this, maybe starting with Lemuel. Crossroads have Crossroads have a lot of magical connotations," Lemuel said. "Places to put magical sites like cairns, places to worship, places to bury suicides, places to execute criminals, and to leave the bodies as warnings. I think we're all aware of the magic of Crossroads," Chewie said, and Joe placed a warning hand on Chewie's shoulder. "Not me," Daedric said cheerfully. Manfred cleared his throat. "Maybe I can shortcut this process. I think you've all met Sylvester, who's taken over the gas and go. Sylvester had told me he's my grandfather. It's his father who's buried out there." Manfred jerked his head to the stoplight direction. "The demon, my great-grandfather." After another long, significant pause, Peachy got up and went over to the two. She looked down at Sylvester, whose dark eyes met hers with a sort of recognition, a kinship. "You didn't say anything when I came into the store," she asked, "because of that look. You've had magical training." "I had to talk to Manfred first," Sylvester said. "Yes, I studied shamanism with my people. I'll need that skill. The time is close at hand." "You say you've been hearing his voice?" "Yes. Demons love witches for their powers. They like to consume it," Sylvester said, in a disturbing matter-of-fact way. But no mistake, you have the power to impress him again. So he wants you on his side. So the demons tried to pull people who don't like me to the circle and get them to kill themselves to make me believe that he's on my side. A demon has been talking to me, she said slowly, as if this were the worst thing that had ever happened to her. Maybe it was. Sylvester nodded. "Your father is a full demon," said an echoing voice. Everyone jumped, and they all looked around for the sources of the voice. "It's Joe," Daedric whispered. "His wings are back." Chewie's were too. The two men were standing in a haze of light, and they had drawn swords, and their wings reached almost to the ceiling. "Yes," Sylvester said. "I helped to imprison him. His name is Kalkanar." "Don't speak his name," Chewie said, his voice echoing like Joe's. "It's an abomination." The Rev stood, too, the scrawny old man looking terrified. "Brothers," he said, we all stand together this night." Olivia ducked her head. She whispered, "Wow. Joe and Chewie, your presence is glorious," said Lemuel. "But Carl, the demon's return to Earth is a crisis. We can't forestall with Sylvester's help." The swords gradually vanished, but the outline of the wings remained. Sylvester went down on one knee because the angels to the show respect and then set. Wait, what? Angels to show respect and then set. Oh, okay. He nodded at Lemuel as if he gave no, as if to give the vampire the floor. Man, the vernacular on this is ridiculous. Before Christine so justly passed away, she completed the transaction. I'm glad I obtained her services since we have only a few days to spare. Wow. Now Lemuel was satisfied he had everyone's complete attention. The witch who sent Sylvester away gave full account of the ritual, and Arya Aklina recorded her words. We will have a part to play, Lemuel began, and I will ask each of you to do a few things. But if we don't do this together, we will die, and we will just be the beginning of the death. Olivia took in a deep breath through her nose. That's an incentive, she muttered. Lemuel continued. The witch then was Lemuel continued. The witch then was a powerful virgin. I know that seems unlikely, but it was the case. She accepted the role of bait in luring the demon in the circle. The circle was drawn in salt and ash, and it was very large. We're going to be busy, Daedric whispered to Quinn. All the people the witch assembled had a part to play, Lemuel said. Now, I don't think if it's any coincidence that this crowd echoes that one. There were angels, psychics, vampires, shapeshifters, men and women who were brave enough to face a demon. They all focused their beliefs in that magic they had on the witch, who was powerful and of herself. Wow. This girl was stuffed with magic in every outfit by the time the shaman started the summoning. Let's see. Kolkanar manifested with a wait, what? Sorry. Hey, DB. Oh. Oh, thank you very much, DB. It means a lot when, you say that and others, are open about what they are thinking, I really appreciate that. I try to be at least somewhat good company. But I'm going to stop it right where we are because I think it's the perfect time. I'm inches away from needing water. And gotta save that voice. But yeah, so can you hear him snoring? Hear that? He's loud to me, but you probably can't hear it. Where was I? Oh yeah, so I'm gonna read tomorrow, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Make sure you go over to Thomas's, the Gilkman's channel, to watch the part 2 of his collaboration video with Ord's Board. He's going to be dropping that at 7:15 Pacific Standard Time tomorrow. But, And so, I'll be reading at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard, and it'll be the Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie, the book. And, come if you, obviously I won't be able to see your costumes, but feel free to dress up for Halloween. I'm going to dress up. I bet you will have no idea who I'm going to dress up as, since I'm surrounded by several reminders. But I want to thank y'all for coming and stopping in and saying hey and whatnot. I really appreciate it. And thanks for listening to me as I just ramble, reading stuff off the list. But yeah, I hope y'all have a good rest of your night / early morning. And happy early Halloween, right? Yeah, cool. Don't eat candy that have razor blades in them. That's my advice. Never gets old. Very topical.